Welcome to Spindle and Spoon Homestead. Today I'm going to share with you how I made some Blackberry Plum Jam. I'm also going to be talking about why I even bother with canning at all, because a lot of times you can buy things cheaper at the store. So the first step in making this jam is to pit all of your plums. These are some plums that we grew on our 2 young plum trees. This is the first decent harvest we've ever gotten from them, so it was very exciting. Pitting plums is a very messy job though, and a bit time consuming. I know there's other methods with special equipment that would make this easier, but I don't have that equipment yet. So I'm kind of slicing them a little bit and then kind of squeezing the pit out. And you don't have to chop them yet at this point, just get the pit out. You don't have to peel them. Just pit them and get them in your big stock pot. So one of the reasons why I like this jam, Blackberry Plum Jam, is that blackberries and plums both are ripe at the same time of year in my area, and also we grow both of them. So it just made sense to combine them into a recipe, and I tried it for the first time last summer and it was delicious. It's probably my favorite jam flavor ever. It's very sweet and tart. And I also really like how the plums and the blackberries cook down into this really nice spreadable texture that's not like really lumpy. Like I like strawberry jam, but sometimes the strawberries, there's a lump or two that didn't get crushed very well. This jam, it cooks down really well and it's very spreadable. So the way that we harvested these plums is we just picked a few every day as they ripened and then put them in the freezer. And once they were all picked, after about a month I think, then I defrosted them and started making the jam. And that's just a tip for any kind of fruit. You don't have to make jam out of fresh fruit. You can freeze the fruit and make the jam at your convenience. That's a really nice thing about our modern day large freezers and deep freezers, is that we don't have to preserve the fruit immediately if we don't want to. Okay, I pureed the fruit with an immersion blender. It's still chunky, but it's mostly pureed. Here I'm measuring it to make sure I have the correct amount of fruit and then pouring it back into the pot. That bowl I have, it has markings on it for measurements. So that's what I was doing there, is just measuring how much pureed fruit I have. Okay, into that same bowl, because it has measurements on it, I'm pouring in a horrifying amount of sugar. I just use regular sugar and pectin in most of my jam recipes. I have tried it in other recipes where you use way less sugar or you use honey, and it's good, but honestly I kind of like the white sugar because you get so much more jam out of it and it just feels like a better bang for your buck. I know that white sugar is very refined and processed and it's not the healthiest, but I also know that if you make a jam with less sugar, it requires more cooking down, and that concentrates the sugar both that you add in and the sugar in the fruit. So it's usually not actually less sugar. It might be less refined sugar, but it might even be slightly more sugar because of how much you have to cook it down. Okay, when making jam, you bring it to a boil and you add the pectin and you stir that in. It's very important that you follow the directions really carefully when making jam. Otherwise, it could end up all liquidy as a syrup instead of setting up as jam. So after you add the pectin, you're going to bring it to a full rolling boil, and you got to stir it and be patient. And a full rolling boil means that it's boiling rapidly even while you are stirring it. The reason I put that sugar in the bowl is because you need to add it all at once at a certain point. So I want it to be ready. If you don't stir the jam at this point, it could scorch on the bottom, and that would not taste good. Checking to see how much it's boiling. It's just barely simmering, so I gotta keep going. I know this part is kind of boring and tedious, but I didn't want to speed it up because I wanted you to see how long this takes and what it looks like. Starting to boil a little more. So one of the things I also wanted to talk about in this video is why even bother canning or making jam at all? Because I could go to Walmart and buy a big jar of blackberry jam for like $4, and I did the math with this jam where the fruit was free, like I picked it, you know, out of my yard, and I only am saving a couple dollars per jar to make this, and that's with already having all the equipment and all the jars and everything. I think I did factor in the lids because you have to buy a new lid every time. But anyway, it's kind of frustrating that it feels like you're not saving very much money. I mean, I did save my family about $50 by making this jam today, and that's not nothing, but it's also not that much in the grand scheme of things. So why even bother? And to me, I think the biggest answer is that I do it because I enjoy it. I don't can everything. I don't can tons of things. And I don't usually can things that I purchase because of the financial aspect of it. It's just not, it's more expensive to do that. Plus, putting in all the time and effort just doesn't make sense to me. But if it's something I grew or something I get for free or really cheap, I think it does make sense to can it because you are saving a little bit of money, and for me anyway, I enjoy it. It's satisfying to do and to see all those jars lined up in your pantry at the end. Okay, it is starting to boil quite a bit more, so I'm keeping an eye on it. And I think there are ways to save money with canning, like making sure you take good care of all your jars and your rings so they last as long as possible, and all your equipment, and growing everything that you can. And by growing things, I don't mean, you know, the most expensive way of growing by like buying seedlings at the store, you know, like tomato seedlings or whatever, and buying bagged potting soil and compost and mulch to fill your garden with. That's gonna get really expensive. Oh, and buying fertilizer. Fertilizer is very expensive. But if you can figure out a system where you're growing food and you're also growing fertilizer, like for me, it's from my rabbits. I use my rabbit manure. And you're slowly building up your soil over time by adding the manure and compost and leaves and whatever else to build your soil over time so that you're not buying a bunch of stuff at the garden center. Learn how to start your own tomato seedlings and cucumber seedlings or whatever you're canning. Plant your own berry bushes and fruit trees. Then at a certain point it is going to be saving you quite a bit of money because you're not going to have to buy anything to get that fruit or vegetable. And then you can can it, which takes a bit of time, but is worth the effort, especially if you kind of enjoy it. Okay, that's looking a lot more like a full rolling boil. It's boiling pretty hard even when I'm stirring it. I apologize for the video quality in this video. I need to figure out a better way to film things on my stove. My stove is in a corner and it's really hard to figure out where to put a camera. But I promise I will keep trying to improve, so stick with me, guys. Okay, I think I'm grabbing the sugar now. My horrifying amount of sugar in the big bowl. Pouring it in all at once. Or maybe not quite all at once, but there's so much I had to stir it. It really is shocking how much sugar goes into jam. And you do want to measure it very carefully. If you don't put in the correct amount of sugar with the amount of pectin, that will prevent your jam from becoming solid or like jelly, you know. It'll be liquidy like syrup. So pay close attention and do things with exactness. Sorry about the video, guys. I'm trying. Okay. So once you dump in all your sugar, you're going to stir it quickly and you're going to boil it, heat it back up to a rolling boil and boil it for exactly 1 minute. I will literally stand there and count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi in my head up to 60. And that is when your jam is finished and you take it off the heat. Another reason why I really like canning or growing food and just having a big pantry and food stored away and just being kind of self-sufficient in general is that there's a lot of reasons why I might not be able to go buy food at the grocery store. I do not consider myself a prepper at all. I do not like that sort of fearful mentality where you're prepping for some kind of huge apocalypse and you're afraid of everything like that's going on in the world. I cannot function like that. I mean, I know that there's things wrong with the world, obviously, but I can't function if I'm thinking about it and prepping for the worst case scenario at all times. It would literally I would just be laying in bed, you know, depressed. I can't function. So I don't worry about that stuff. I just basically do what I enjoy doing. And it happens to be this homesteading and self-sufficiency stuff. There's a lot of other things I enjoy too, but that's a big part of most of my hobbies. And it comes in handy because there's actually a lot of reasons besides an apocalypse that I might not be able to go buy food. Reasons like I'm just trying to save money, trying to watch my budget, maybe in the past, these are reasons why I personally have not gone to the store and bought food in my lifetime. I have car problems and can't get to the store. There's a power outage at the store. I am sick, or people in my family are sick and we don't want to leave the house. There's a flood or a storm going on and it's not safe to leave the house. there's a supply chain issue like during COVID where the food literally isn't on the shelf at the store. Sometimes I just don't feel like going to the store. Actually, this is most of the time. I'm a homebody. I just want to stay home and putter around and do the things that I love doing. Maybe I just had a baby. I've had 4 kids, and when you have a newborn, the last thing you want to do is pack the newborn up and take it to a grocery store. Maybe I just don't even have money. That hasn't happened to me in a long time, but in my past, there was a time where I literally had no money to buy food except WIC food, and fortunately I already had food that had been given to me, so we never went hungry. I just couldn't go to the store and buy whatever I wanted, you know. But that was a very short time, thankfully. Oh, I gotta go back to the recipe. So I skimmed off the foam after boiling for exactly 1 minute. And now I'm removing my hot jam jars from my canner. They have been simmering away this whole time. And I'm going to ladle in the jam so that it is a 1/4 inch from the rim, from the top of the jar. I'm using a jar funnel. You absolutely must have a jar funnel. This is very messy, even with a jar funnel. Trust me, you want a jar funnel. Making jam in general is just very messy. Everything will be sticky afterwards. There's a lot of big pots to wash. It's a whole thing, and so make sure you enjoy it. And you do have to be careful filling it exactly to the right level, but there's a little measuring tool that I'm going to use in a second that makes it easy to see. This is a headspace measuring tool. You can measure exactly the correct distance between the jam and the very top of the jar. All of this stuff going on is very hot. This jam was boiling just moments ago, so you've got to be really careful. The jars are hot. The jam is hot. Be careful. Okay, with lids, you do not have to sterilize them. It is not one of the requirements from the government, people who test these things. So I just washed them, and now I'm putting them on. Oh, first I wipe the rims with a wet paper towel because it's messy. Even with the funnel, you're going to spill a little bit on the rims. And you don't want that jam to be in between the lid and the glass, or the seal could get messed up. Another good reason to can is because you can make different kinds of flavors and things that you can't buy. I love doing that, like this blackberry plum. I don't think you can buy that anywhere. I could be wrong. Okay, when you're screwing on your rings, you don't really screw, like crank down on it. You just screw it just barely so it's holding. You want the seal to seal because of the water bath, not because you cranked it down really hard. Alright, now I'm putting them all back in the canner. Everything is very hot. And I'm going to heat it up to boiling with the lid on, and once it's boiling, I set the timer for 10 minutes and process them, and then you can remove them. Be very careful. Once they're removed, you don't want to touch them for about 24 hours or until they're cooled completely, because you don't want to disturb the seal. You want these to seal on their own, and if they don't seal, then you can just put them in your fridge. Now I'm checking the seals the next day. I'm wiping the jars because sometimes they're a little sticky, and I'm taking off the rings to double check each seal to make sure it's really on there. I had 2 jars that didn't seal, so I put them in my fridge. And you don't really want to store them with the rings on because it can mess with the seal and make it so you think it's sealed when it's not really. It's just a safety thing. One of the other reasons I love canning is that it's very low waste because you can reuse the jars and the rings and all your equipment over and over. But if you buy jam at the store, you're throwing away or recycling that jar every time you buy one. So that's pretty cool and it makes me happy. And you're also hopefully using local produce that either you grew or you got locally, so that reduces on transportation. So it's a really sustainable way to get jam. And when you store them in the pantry, do not stack them. That can also mess with the seal and damage the seal. And there you go. Blackberry Plum Jam.